The roar of engines, the blur of colors, the adrenaline that shakes the grandstands. IndyCar racing is one of the most thrilling and dangerous sports on Earth. Drivers know that every lap carries both glory and risk. For Dan Wheldon, a beloved champion and family man, October 16, 2011 was supposed to be a triumphant return to the track. Instead, it became the day of his terrifying final moments, a tragedy that shook the racing world to its core. Dan Wheldon was no stranger to victory. Born in England, he rose quickly through the ranks of motorsport, eventually becoming one of IndyCar's brightest stars. He was charismatic, fearless, and immensely talented. By 2011, Wheldon had already etched his name into racing history, winning the prestigious Indianapolis 500 twice, in 2005 and again in 2011. That second win was especially emotional, as he had been struggling to secure a full-time seat. Against all odds, he proved once more that he belonged at the very top. The season-ending race at Las Vegas Motor Speedway was meant to be another big moment for him. He wasn't racing for the championship, but he had been given a special challenge. If he could win the race, he would take home a $5 million prize, split with a lucky fan. For Wheldon, it wasn't just about money, it was about proving himself again, and reminding the racing world that his career was far from over. The excitement in Las Vegas was electric, but beneath the surface, drivers were uneasy. The race had an unusually large field, 34 cars, on a track that wasn't designed for that many. The combination of high banking, incredible speeds over 220 miles per hour, and tight pack racing made for a recipe of chaos. Several drivers voiced concerns before the start, warning that the conditions were unsafe. Wheldon himself admitted he knew the risks, but like any racer, he strapped in with determination. From the very start, the race was intense. Cars ran side by side, inches apart, at blistering speeds. Wheldon, starting from the back of the grid in 34th position, had a long climb ahead of him, but he was making progress, slicing through the field with the skill of a veteran. Every lap carried danger, the kind where one small mistake could cause a chain reaction. Up ahead of Wheldon, two cars made contact. In an instant, the tightly packed field turned into chaos. One car spun sideways, another went airborne, and within seconds, 15 cars were caught in a massive fiery pileup. Wheldon, traveling at full speed, had almost no time to react. As he tried to avoid the wreckage, his car was launched into the air after striking another. The vehicle flew nearly 30 feet, flipped violently, and smashed into the catch fencing above the wall. The force was catastrophic. The top of his car struck the steel poles of the fence, causing fatal injuries. The scene was apocalyptic. Flames, smoke, shattered cars scattered across the track. Commentators, fans, and even fellow drivers were horrified. "Oh my God, there's been a massive crash," one voice trembled over the broadcast. The race was red-flagged immediately. Emergency crews rushed to the scene, pulling drivers from burning cars, checking for injuries. Many were shaken but alive. But all eyes soon turned to one car, Dan Wheldon's. The severity of his crash was clear, and medical teams worked frantically. He was airlifted by helicopter to a nearby hospital. In the pits, drivers waited in stunned silence. Some sat in their cars with heads bowed, others openly wept. They all knew that what had just happened was different. The air was thick with dread. Hours later, the official word came. Dan Wheldon had died from unsurvivable injuries. He was just 33 years old, a husband, a father of 2 young boys, a champion, and one of the sport's brightest personalities was gone. The news devastated the racing community. Drivers embraced each other, many in tears, as the reality sunk in. IndyCar officials made a decision that showed both the respect and the grief shared by everyone at the track.
Instead of continuing the race, the drivers returned to their cars for a solemn tribute. In silence, 19 cars lined up and drove 5 slow laps around Las Vegas Motor Speedway in honor of Dan Wheldon. No engine screamed in competition. Instead, they hummed in unity, a haunting reminder of the cost of the sport. Fans stood with tears in their eyes, waving British flags in memory of their fallen hero. Dan Wheldon's death was a turning point for IndyCar. His accident forced the sport to re-examine safety measures and car design. The next generation of Indy cars included improved cockpits, stronger protection against fencing, and other innovations aimed at preventing such tragedies. In many ways, Wheldon's sacrifice helped protect future drivers. But beyond safety, what people remember most is who Dan was. Friends described him as warm, funny, and endlessly competitive. He had an infectious smile and the kind of personality that drew people in. For fans, he wasn't just a driver, he was a connection to the soul of racing. The terrifying last minutes of Dan Wheldon's life remind us how quickly triumph can turn into tragedy. One moment he was chasing glory, the next he was gone. It is a stark reality of motorsport. Behind the glamour and the speed lies mortal danger. Dan's legacy isn't just the trophies he won or the records he set. It's the courage he showed, the risks he took, and the love he shared with his family and fans. Even in his final terrifying moments, he was doing what he loved most, racing at the very limit, chasing the checkered flag. He left us too soon, but his memory continues to live in every lap, every roar of the engine, and every young racer who dares to dream. The tragedy of Dan Wheldon's final race wasn't just about a car spinning out of control. It was about how quickly joy can turn to horror. Just moments before the crash, Wheldon was doing what he loved most, racing with precision and courage, looking for opportunities to move up the field. His focus was clear, his talent undeniable. The crowd could feel the intensity of the moment, unaware that history was about to change in a way no one wanted. As the cars entered lap 11, everything unraveled in a flash. Drivers were tightly bunched together, moving at speeds exceeding 220 miles per hour. One slight touch between vehicles triggered a devastating chain reaction. More than a dozen cars were caught in the chaos, spinning, colliding, and shattering into fragments of metal and fire. And in the middle of it all was Dan Wheldon's car, launched airborne before crashing violently into the catch fencing. Could this tragedy have been prevented? Many experts later argued that the sheer number of cars on such a fast, high-banked oval created a recipe for disaster. Wheldon himself had voiced concerns about the risks of this race format. Yet, like the true competitor he was, he chose to face the challenge head-on. The aftermath was heartbreaking. Fellow drivers rushed to the pit wall, some in tears, others silent in shock. They all knew that what had just happened was different. The air was thick with dread. When officials confirmed Wheldon had not survived, a wave of grief swept through the racing world. The race was stopped, and in a moment of unity, every driver completed a 5-lap salute in his honor. Dan Wheldon's story is remembered not only for the way he left us, but for the extraordinary life he lived. A 2-time Indianapolis 500 champion, a beloved father, and a friend to many. His legacy reminds us that greatness often carries risks. His final minutes were terrifying, but his life was nothing short of inspiring.